Have you ever felt suffocated by the noise of the world? Have you noticed how we are constantly surrounded by external voices, notifications, opinions, demands, expectations, and in the midst of it all, we end up losing the most important sound, the voice of our own soul. We live in a society that values speaking out, exposing ourselves, shouting louder than others to be noticed. But the great sages of all ages have taught us the exact opposite. True power lies not in speaking, but in silencing. It is in silence that the universe whispers its greatest secrets. It is when the noise ceases that we can hear what truly matters. Silence. It is not just the absence of sound, it is a presence. It is a sacred space where our soul can breathe, reflect, and reconnect with the divine essence that dwells within us. And we are not only talking about external silence, but above all, inner silence, mental stillness, the empty space between one thought and another. The conscious pause that reconnects us with the wisdom of the spirit. But why is it so hard to quiet the mind? Because it has been trained to be constantly in motion. It feeds on noise, anxiety, haste, and internal conflicts. Our mind is like a broken radio, changing stations every second, filling us with voices that are not always ours. Fears that don't always make sense, desires that don't always belong to us. Wisdom begins when we learn to observe these thoughts without identifying with them, when we understand that we are the awareness observing, not the mental storm passing through. The first step to hearing the voice of the soul is simply silence. The soul doesn't shout, it whispers. It speaks through intuition, goosebumps, chills, synchronicity, the feeling of inexplicable peace. And when we are too busy thinking, judging, reacting, we stop hearing that subtle and sacred voice. We lose contact with what is purest within us. How many times have you ignored that inner call out of fear, doubt, or believing it was just your imagination? How many decisions have you made by listening to others and ignoring yourself? The wisdom of silence is, above all, the courage to trust yourself, to trust God acting through your heart. Many spiritual masters like Jesus, Buddha, Francis of Assisi, and many others often withdrew to isolated places. They knew that silence feeds the soul, that the inner world must be cultivated with the same intensity with which we strive to grow in the outer world, and that without this sacred silence, we are at the mercy of emotional storms and mental confusion. The practice of silence begins slowly, 1 minute a day, one conscious breath, a pause before reacting, a more attentive look within. And over time, this practice becomes a state of being. You begin to live with more presence, more clarity, more direction, because now you know the voice that matters is not the loudest, but the one that speaks with truth. When we learn to be silent, we access a source of wisdom that is beyond the rational mind. We begin to feel the path, not just think about it. We start to act with purpose, not out of impulse. And we discover that there is a greater intelligence guiding our steps, but it only reveals itself in silence. In the next part, we will explore how to silence the mind in practice and how to transform silence into a tool for healing and reconnection with the divine. Motivation you need, where your awareness expands and your soul finds direction. Silencing the mind seems simple, but anyone who's tried knows it resists. The mind is programmed to survive, control, plan, judge. It wants to understand everything logically, but the soul speaks another language. The soul speaks in symbols, sensations, inspirations, and signs. And to hear it, we must re-educate the mind not to destroy it, but to place it in service of awareness. One of the most powerful paths to achieve inner silence is conscious breathing. Inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and observe. Just that changes everything. When you breathe with presence, you break the cycle of automatic thinking. You step out of autopilot and return to the now where life truly happens. The mind lives in the past and the future. The soul lives in the present, and silence is the portal between these two worlds. It's not about completely stopping thoughts, that's unrealistic. It's about creating space between one thought and the next. About not getting dragged by the idea that arises, simply observing, like watching clouds pass in the sky. Meditation is not about forcing the mind to empty. It's allowing it to calm down naturally, like a lake that stops rippling when the wind ceases. And this wind is us, our agitation, our fears, our need to control. When we trust, the lake becomes still. And at the bottom of that lake lies our soul. Another secret to quieting the mind is silencing our words. Speak less. Listen more. Don't react to everything. Don't explain yourself all the time. Don't try to convince anyone. Outer silence reflects inner silence. When you learn not to respond to every provocation, you begin to master yourself, because someone who always needs to justify themselves doesn't fully trust who they are. There is immense power in staying quiet when provoked, in pausing before answering, in not engaging in battles that only feed the ego. Silence in these situations is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's choosing peace over being right. It's showing that you understand not everything deserves your energy. How many times have you regretted speaking too much? And how many times have you regretted remaining silent? Most of the time it's not silence that hurts, but the words spoken without awareness. And what transforms is not the speech, but the vibration you emit with your presence. Silence also protects us. It is a spiritual wall against negative energies. When we are silent and centered, we are less affected by external chaos. We become like mountains, firm, unshakable, even as storms rage around us. And it is in silence that we begin to hear God, not the God built by religions and dogmas, but the living God within us who speaks through our hearts. Intuition becomes clearer, signs more evident, paths more illuminated, because now there's room for the divine to act. Now there is enough silence for the sacred to manifest. You begin to notice synchronicities. The right people show up. Ideas emerge from nowhere. Answers you've been searching for appear in dreams, conversations, or even in absolute silence. That's not coincidence. That's the soul speaking. That's the universe responding to your conscious listening. In the next episode, we'll talk about how silence is used by great spiritual masters and how we can incorporate this wisdom into our daily lives, even while living in a noisy and chaotic world. Motivation you need, where your awareness expands and your soul finds direction. Have you ever noticed how the great spiritual masters almost always speak very little? And when they do speak, their words carry a force that pierces the heart. That's no coincidence. Silence is an essential practice among the wise. They understood that true teaching is not found in words. It's in the energy transmitted through presence. Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, Francis of Assisi. All of them understood the value of retreat, stillness, and time spent in silence with God. Because silence is where the soul finds its nourishment. The noise of the world confuses and distracts us, but silence realigns us with our essence. Francis of Assisi used to retreat for days in the mountains, not to run away from the world but to strengthen his spirit before returning to serve with compassion. Jesus would withdraw from the crowds to pray in silence in the desert. Buddha remained silent for days after his enlightenment because he understood that there is no human language capable of expressing the ineffable. And we in our modern lives need these moments too. We don't have to abandon everything and live in a monastery, but we can create sacred moments of silence throughout our day. Just 5 minutes of complete silence every day can change your life. It's in that small space that the soul begins to emerge. That's when the noise of the mind starts to give way to inner wisdom. Many people say they don't have time for that, but isn't it precisely because we're so busy, so overwhelmed, that we need it the most? Silence is not a luxury. It is a necessity of the soul. It's a remedy for anxiety, confusion, and information overload. It's where healing begins. You don't need advanced techniques. Just begin by sitting in silence, observing your breath and your thoughts, without clinging to any of them. Just watch. Like watching a river flow. At first, the mind will resist. It will try to sabotage you. It will say, this is a waste of time. But if you persist, it will begin to settle. And then something magical happens. You start to notice things you've never seen before. You begin to feel people's energy. You start to notice the signs from the universe. You begin to hear your intuition. You begin to feel peace, with no apparent reason. That is the soul speaking. And when it speaks, everything changes. Another important point. Silence is necessary not only with others but especially with yourself. How often do you mentally attack yourself? How often do you judge, blame, or criticize yourself in silence? Learn to quiet those destructive thoughts too. Learn to treat yourself with kindness, with presence, with respect. You don't need to shout to make yourself heard. You don't need to explain yourself to be worthy. Your value lies in your being, not your speech. Sometimes, silence is the loudest expression of strength you can offer. It's telling the world, I trust. I listen to myself. I don't need external approval. This kind of silence heals traumas, that strengthens identity, and opens spiritual pathways that have been locked for years. In the next and final part, we'll close this cycle by understanding how to live in silence even amidst the noise of the world, and how this state can open portals to a new spiritual reality. Motivation you need, where your awareness expands, and your soul finds direction. The final stage of this path is to bring silence with you into the world. You don't need a forest or a monastery to find inner stillness. You can be surrounded by noise and still remain in silence within. That's the true spiritual challenge, and also the greatest liberation. When you develop inner silence, you are no longer a victim of chaos. The world may scream, but you choose peace. Others may judge, but you choose not to react. The system may impose fear, but you choose to trust in the divine. This is not indifference. It is sacred neutrality. It is the understanding that most of what happens outside has no true power over who you are within. It is choosing not to waste energy trying to control what's out there, and instead focusing on aligning your internal frequency. A being who is in silence emits a different energy. Their presence calms the environment. Their words, even few, penetrate deeply. Their gaze communicates what no speech can express. That's because their soul is in the foreground, and the soul speaks in silence. From this space of stillness, decisions become clearer. You no longer act out of impulse. You wait, you observe, you discern, and only then do you act, guided not by anxiety, but by wisdom. The world today needs people who carry this energy. While many are lost in reactions, in debates, in endless scrolling. The one who finds silence becomes a lighthouse, a reference, a living example that there is another way to exist, and that way is not about escaping life. It is about living it with presence, listening more, feeling more, connecting more, trusting more. The one who lives in inner silence becomes the master of their reality, because they are no longer at the mercy of noise. They are guided by the whisper of the soul, and that whisper always leads to truth. Now, I invite you to take a moment, place one hand on your heart, close your eyes, and simply breathe. Inhale, peace. Exhale, chaos. Listen, that is a voice inside you that doesn't scream, but it knows it's the divine in you, waiting for your permission to guide your path. And if this video touched your soul, comment below. I choose silence to hear my soul. Your word has power. Your intention creates reality. Share this message with someone who needs to remember who they are. And above all, watch the next video here on motivation you need. You truly need to hear what comes next, because one insight, one phrase, one moment can change the direction of your entire life. Motivation you need, where your awareness expands and your soul finds direction.